Welcome to another episode of Man Down Podcast. We are talking today about some reader questions. We are also doing some Reddit therapy. Occasionally, we'll abuse Patrick for whatever various and sundry things we can think of to
Mhm.
abuse him, because
Sure.
that's one of the things we like to do. Welcome aboard, Patrick, my lovable Binky co-host.
Good to be here, Ted.
Do you
Look,
like my garishly loud outfit here?
I didn't want to draw attention to it. I felt like it drew enough attention to it itself. But what I like about it is that because our faces are by each other on the page, it feels like it's really offsetting the pink in my lips. You know,
That's what I was going for.
I'm glad.
Given a sort of summary here, just thought we'd match your complexion. Like if you gotten any sort of sun recently, it's lovely here in England for
Mhm.
once. All right, so today I believe we are going to talk about a couple of different things that we got questions from our readers. We're going to look at some discussion around emotional suppression. We're going to look at finding long-term meaning fulfillment. I mean, that's kind of fucking deep. I don't know like how much we'll look at it because that's terrifying. And then we've got we've got the topic du jour of this particular week when we're recording, which is Olly Murs getting ripped and the reactions and differing reactions from the male population and the female population.
Mm.
And then we have a classic, Am I the Asshole? Where would you like to start today, sir?
I think that we should prioritize the people who listen to the podcast. You know,
And not Olly Murs?
yeah. Also, we are going to have to do an explainer, right? For people like, do people
Yes.
know who? I barely know who
No.
Olly Murs is.
No. We'll get there.
Okay.
Yes, let's prioritize our good friends who have decided to chime in on the comments and ask us questions. So we have Koizar Us. A
Hmm.
little bit of a terrible football pun there. Great stuff. Curious about emotional suppression. I know lots of people who don't look down on crying, but can't get themselves to. You're in good company. Sometimes my mind just goes blank, and sometimes I even feel good after a while when I know I should be deeply sad. I'm curious about any thoughts on different ways people purposely or accidentally, as a reflex, manage to cry or don't feel their feelings.
Okay. So, yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of curious about this, right? Because you can feel the disconnection. You know, the sadness is there, and it feels like we expect it to be expressed in a certain way, and you might even want it to be expressed that way. Yet
And
at
in
the
a
same,
certain period of time as well.
sure, but it often feels like you're trying to cry because you need to prove to yourself that you can, and at the same time you know there's something in you that's holding it back. I felt this way. I remember when I went to both of my grandmothers died quite close to each other. This is like 2011 ish, and I could only go to one. One was in South Africa, and one was in the northwest of England. And I went to that one, and I remember at that thinking, "Huh, I do feel sad. I should be crying." I tried to make myself cry. It didn't work, and even if it had worked, I was like, "I'm trying to do it. Like I'm having to sort of fake it here."
Let me go chop some onions.
Yeah, it was kind of like, can I think of sad stuff? And then I was like, that doesn't feel right. That I've got to think of sadder stuff than my grandmother dying. You know, though that wasn't like super close to my grandparents. But
I'm sorry about laughing at your
no,
sad
it's all
stuff and
right.
your grandmother dying. Now I feel bad.
What else are we going to laugh at? I think look, there's a premise here that I would want to deny, which is crying isn't the only way of feeling sad. If you
Mm.
feel sad and you know you feel sad and you're willing to sit there and feel sad, whether you cry or not is kind of immaterial. You don't have to cry to be processing your sadness. Now, if you literally can't cry, then that is obviously a bit of a block that's going on. But I still think that so long as you're thinking about it and feeling it, that's okay. The question is whether you are still feeling it. And it seems like this person thinks that if they're not crying, they're not feeling it. That may be true and it may not be true. So that's one bit that I'd like to problematize here, I think.
Yeah, like there's an element of emotional compartmentalization that
Mm-hmm.
happens with a lot of men. And the question is like, when can you open the compartment? And what is the right venue to be able to do that? And it's not even always healthy to do it. Like many times it's not intentional. You have done it because you needed to do it or you naturally did it. But the reality is like the whole process of crying is something that's deeply ingrained in humans from the time that we're born. And it
Mm-hmm.
actually is, it's like you've been out drinking too much and you need to take a tactical vomit. in order to be able to get rid of that stuff and sort of get through to the other side. In some cases, it's a really valuable thing to do
Hmm.
so that you can then get back to being more healthy. Or if you're like the children that seem to have recently taken their GCSEs when they get the results or the A level results, they'll take a tactical chunder, is what they call it, and then they just start drinking all over again.
Hmm.
What you do there is at the end of the day is your own choice. But the whole process of crying is actually quite a valuable one for the
Hmm.
body and for your mental health. And I think that this might be where this question is coming from. And maybe if you as a therapist had some insight as to like the whole process of emotions around this and emotional suppression or compartmentalization is also a really critical kind of scary thing because like we've talked about before, you don't want it creeping up on you and eating you alive at the wrong moments or causing you to have a massive breakdown like has happened in my own life. So
Yeah, I think there's a so I think what I was saying before is like a general thing that might be worth thinking about. I think this particular question, the questioner is clearly has set a habit of avoiding these emotions when they get too much. When you say sometimes my mind just goes blank, this is a protective thing, and I'm not going to say that you're disassociating, but that sounds a little bit like disassociation. It
mhm.
sounds a little bit like avoidance. It's a way of your brain saying let's push that to the back of mind. And often what we haven't done, what often that feels like it's a response to not having safe places to feel these feelings.
Yeah.
Maybe it was your house, maybe it was your school, whatever. So what we need to do over time is try to reestablish the idea that there are safe spaces to feel these things. And there are lots of good ways to try and do this. I think for a lot of people, for some people it really works to like put on sad music and try and really get into the zone that way and try and do this in a short period of time. Yeah, I
That's
think
me.
I think
I
that really
I
works.
I've created lists of like very sad songs. Like
Hmm.
some of them are triggers from different points in my life. And I will, when I feel like I need to, like I will listen to it and I give myself permission to have like
Hmm.
really deep feelings during that period of time. And that it helps somewhat. It doesn't always help. Sometimes I'll share this list with other people who also, I'm like, hey, this is one of the ways that I do it. If you need some sad music, like it's there. I did have one time where I was boarding a flight back from New York City and I was like really sad, like kind of not to be sort of moving on with my life, like kind of in the United States because I have all these ties back here. But I was allowing myself to sort of grieve for what I couldn't do.
Hmm.
And the flight attendant comes to me and she's like, "Are you all right?" And I was like, "I'm okay. I'm allowing myself to feel sad." And she's like, "Oh, okay. I really respect that." I was like, "Well, thank you. That's very sweet, but I'm gonna just be here by myself. Thank you."
Hmm. But this is a thing that people often don't do. They kind of do half the process, right? Which is there's a really valuable skill, which is being able to file away your emotions at moments where they're going to overwhelm you.
Mhm.
Like that is useful,
Yeah.
but it needs to be coupled with the ability to find that file later on. So something that I do with clients sometimes is a visualization. So you imagine a box, some kind of container that has your feelings about this thing in them. So I've done this with bereaved clients. I've done it with clients who have issues around body image, that kind of thing. And this can be really helpful because if something comes up in the course of your day and you're really worried about it, preventing you from being able to function with your kids or at work, then you can visualize putting that in this box, putting that box wherever you imagine keeping it. Maybe it's in a storage room, maybe it's under your bed, maybe it's in your wardrobe, and saying, I'm not hiding it away permanently. I'm putting it somewhere so that I can find it later. And then later on, you do the other part of the visualization, which is you imagine going into that storage room. You imagine getting the box down. You open the box and you see what's inside. And this can be really powerful for a lot of people. We get them to really imagine the room where it is, to imagine the place that the box is, what kind of box it is. Is it a storage box? Is it a safe? Is it a shoe box? All this kind of stuff. And how close is it to you? That's often a real indication of where a client is with it. Is it in a storage room that they imagine, in a kind of storage facility? Is it under their bed? That tells you a lot about where a client is with this feeling. But the idea that there is a time and place for this stuff, that you're not just avoiding it, both helps the process of putting it away in the moment and helps the process of finding it to process it later. So if this is something you struggle with, look, honestly, you build up these habits over a long time, it's probably going to take you a long time to work through it. But that doesn't mean you can't see some gains like quickly. I'm just saying that these are patterns that you've built. Like, they take a while to change. It's like trying to lose fat. You got to work at it.
Months, years of time,
Exactly.
energy, pain.
And consistency.
Yeah.
Consistency, right? So I would maybe try this if it sounds like it's something that might work for you. Think about a box. Really picture the box. Make it as tactile as possible in your mind. Really picture where that box is. And when you open it, what do you see? Do you see, say it's about body image, do you see pictures of yourself? Do you have audio recordings in there of people who said cruel things about your body? What does it look like? And really try and turn those things over and ask yourself again and again and again, what am I feeling? What am I feeling? What am I feeling? And over time, that question will become more automatic. You won't have to kind of do it in such a methodical way, I guess. But this could be really helpful. And quite honestly, most people at different points don't feel their feelings. We talked a couple of weeks ago. Sorry, I'm going on, so I'll give you Ted a chance to
No,
speak in a minute because I'm rabbiting.
I think everybody's listening to you, and it's really valuable.
But we were talked a couple of weeks ago about attachment theory, and I said, look, I tend towards anxious and not avoidant, and I was thinking about it since, and actually there have been times when I've been avoidant. And one of them was after my wife had a miscarriage. So in between our two children, my wife had a miscarriage, and it was about 6 weeks, 5, 6 weeks. And I did not stop to think about it.
Mm.
I didn't take half a day off work to think about it. I was there for my wife in body, but I don't think I was really there for her emotionally.
You checked
And
out.
yeah, I checked out. It was too much. And the way I can tell it was too much is that I didn't really cry about it at the time. And now whenever I think about it, I cry about it. Whenever I think about it, I feel really sad about it because it was unprocessed. And this is something that you've talked about previously, Ted. Like, you give yourself a debt to these emotions, and that debt has to be repaid. Like, it comes due at some point, this check. So everybody does this to some degree. Everybody does it to some degree. They really do, especially when they're young, because you don't know where is safe for you to feel these emotions. But the fact that you want to learn, and the fact that you're asking yourself, that you've noticed my mind goes blank and then I might even feel good later. Well, yeah, because you're trying to suppress it, trying to push it down. You're trying to forget about it. I think that it's really important that you're doing that. So when you say you should be deeply sad, maybe think instead, I know that I am sad. Like, don't think about it in terms of shoulds. I think you are sad, but you're trying to distract yourself. And you can say, like, now's actually a good time for it to come out and see what comes. And it might not come at first, but in the long run, I think I'm telling you as someone who has done this work, like, you do get there. Like, I cried this morning because my wife was describing my favorite scene in The Lion King. So you'll get there if you want to get there.
I think the inversion of this is also something you've talked about before and is really valuable. So for those of you who are feeling too much
Mm-hmm.
and doing it pretty regularly, you've talked about kind of giving yourself a timer and
Yeah.
saying, hey, this is a period of time where I'm going to allow myself to feel deeply. And then I'm going to put that away, just like in the box. And then, I know that it's there when it's an appropriate time to come back to it. And over time, it allows you to not necessarily compartmentalize, but to give yourself permission to deeply feel where it won't be overwhelming to you. And also,
Mm-hmm.
in many cases, you realize that this depth of feeling doesn't kill me, but it also doesn't get me anywhere. And so
Mm-hmm.
I've already felt that. Like, I don't need to keep going back to it over and over again, which is something that you get trapped in when you've had kind of traumatic moments or things that you're trying to deal with that are proving really challenging. That's the other side of this. So in one case, it's like, make sure that you are in touch with your emotions, where they're at, that you can find them and you should go visit them on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And the other ones, you're like, but occasionally you can put them away and bring them back out at the appropriate times. Because when I built up my debt, like, I spent sort of 5 or 6 weeks just completely on fire and
Yeah.
feeling too much all the time. And that was, I mean, if I had been trying to run a business at that time, it would have been horrific.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so be careful with this stuff, but also like definitely bring it more as part of your whole person and not just something that you visit from time to time or that you keep at arm's length.
Yeah, yeah, I really agree. I think, look, what you're experiencing here is something that you can see even when somebody starts crying. You'll often see them blink, 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 try and blink the tears back in. You know, what you're seeing there is like the physical manifestation of the emotional process that you're talking about here. And it's tempting in these situations to imagine yourself as defective in some way. You know, a lot of people come into therapy, a lot of men come into therapy and they say, I can't do this. This part of me feels broken. I can't access my emotions. You know, there's something in me that's gone wrong. A lot of this is often you're trying to make sure that other people aren't uncomfortable, especially when it comes to things like grief. You know, we grow up being told, don't cry, that kind of stuff. And when it comes to grief, people are terrified of grief, man. Grief is fucking scary. It feels profane. It feels obscene to watch somebody really grieve. If you've ever been to a funeral where someone's really feeling it, my God, like you're seeing something that is basic, you know, really deep down inside. You may work out that actually some of this suppression was done because you were trying to look after people around you, because you thought that how they were doing mattered more than how you were doing. So look, it's a process and it's not permanently damaged. You can only weaken this, but it's like a muscle, you can build it back up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so moving on, totally different topic here. Thanks, guys. I would like to hear you talking about finding long term meaning and fulfillment, especially aimed at young men, early 20s here. I feel today's society kind of teaches, molds, tempts young men to perform actions that give short term gratification at the cost of long term happiness. Also, I feel that myself and probably other young men don't know how to heal, but rather distract themselves instead. All of my undealt with problems hit a boiling point recently when I quit the company I'd started, and I wish I'd known how to deal with them earlier. Not that I really know how to deal with them now either. I'm trying through therapy, being more healthy, and facing my emotions. So, this is kind of a big question, and there are lots of elements inside of it. I think maybe we should jump into some of the bits in the middle, which is effectively that like society kind of tempts men to perform actions that give short-term gratification at the cost of long-term happiness. This will be a repeated theme for us, which is you as a younger person like, that doesn't have children, especially, you have infinite time compared to other people, and you are a time billionaire. As a time billionaire, you could spend that time any number of ways. If you're playing endless FIFA games or Fortnite games, and you're just sort of like you're just burning this time for no gratification whatsoever, other than some dopamine hits from the competitive space, you should think about tamping that down a bit. Like, give yourself sets of limits for when you're going to video game, and then think about what types of skills would it be useful for me to build. Like, what do you want to do with your life, right? Like,
Mm.
you can build a better career, you can build a better set of relationships with your friends, you could take up tons of different hobbies that have lasting value, whether it's now or into the future. You can just become more learned, and you can spend some of that time either reading fiction is fine, becoming an absolute savant of movies, as Patrick happens to be. Like, he loves to watch terrible fucking films that you'll never actually want to watch, and then comment about it in podcasts. There are so many different ways that you could do things in your life, and the thing about short-term gratification is much of that is just burning all that time for zero benefit whatsoever. So that's one place to think about, and then there's this like whole other thing.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. Like, I think when he says teachers slash molds slash tempts young men to
Yeah.
to chase short term gratification, tempts I think more than the other two. I mean, or at least I'd want to hear a stronger case. But yeah, I completely agree. Like, and these don't have to be chores. You know, do you
No.
want to be the kind of person who speaks another language? Do you want to be the kind of person who plays an instrument or who can cook or all this kind of stuff? Because if you do, you kind of need to do something about it. It's not going to happen like magically. You're not going to get hit on the head and wake up speaking French. Every time that happens, it turns out to be bullshit. So, and these things also, I think you might discover about yourself that you have the ability to knuckle down. A lot of us, maybe through school, felt like we knew the way we learned. And actually, it was the way we learned in that context.
Mhm.
The way you learn when you really want to do something and when you can organize your own learning and when you know yourself a little bit better is totally different and is often much more enjoyable and effective. So that's a part of it. What part of this do you want to talk about here, though, Ted? Because I was like, this could go in like six directions.
Yeah, so long-term meaning and fulfillment is kind of a big anchor here. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
huge, right? And I will tell you, at no point in one's life do you necessarily know exactly what this means for you. It will change. The answers that you would have for like what do I think would give me meaning, fulfillment right now
Mm-hmm.
will change over time. And I've had this change a few different times. I was lucky enough to be able to create a company that effectively was part of my life's work. And I'd been working on it for a long time, and I'm still working in it. Like I work in sports betting and sports data in football, and that's been beautiful. But it's not the thing that like I would say over my next 20 years are going to be like something that's long term meaning and fulfillment in my life. In fact, I chose to park that for a bit so I could spend time with my kids, and that is paramount because I know that like there's only so much time that I get left. So I'm very aware of time right now. The other parts are build things that I think last for you and for other people. And those elements are sometimes challenging to figure out what they are. But I think that you just hit on a few different ones. I think cooking's like a really valuable one there. And we'll
Mm-hmm.
do a whole episode on cooking. But learning to cook for yourself and for other people better has enormous compounding life benefits from now forever, forever. And it's just about practice and a bit of learning. And the best thing about the world as it exists right now for people that like to learn is all of the knowledge is there. And what isn't
Mm-hmm.
there might need to be figured out. You might be the person to do it. Like you can just keep testing because we've seen so many things change over the last 10 or 15 years based off of people doing and then iterating and learning and sharing their knowledge. So I would say that what you hit on there, like long-term meaning fulfillment could be your career. Like, what do you kind of want your career? Where do your skills build there? Hobbies, what do you want to build there? Or become the person that you think will most likely attract the person that you're also comfortable with, the person you want to spend your life with. Like those are all different ways and spaces in your mid 20s that you should probably spend some time thinking about and building some foundations to then be able to graduate forward.
There's kind of a double meaning in that, become the person that you think might attract the person you want to spend your life with. The person you're going to spend your life with
Is you.
is you.
Yeah.
Like you would ideally like and admire that person if possible. But I think also you're going to have to get comfortable with the idea of working a little bit harder sometimes. I don't know if this is necessarily true of this guy, but it's true of a lot of people. The thing about going and playing a video game or whatever it might be is that it's not necessarily going to improve you if it never feels challenging.
We're not saying that you're doing this, by the way.
Yeah, sure.
We're giving examples of
But
what most men do.
like the same goes, if your exercise never challenges you, you're not getting better. Now you might be okay with maintaining, but you're probably not okay with maintaining in every aspect of your life.
Mm.
And so if you want to be a good writer, you're probably going to have to read some stuff that feels a little bit too difficult for you. If you want to become a better chef, you're going to have to try and cook some stuff that feels challenging. If you want to know about films, like as Ted's saying, like you might need to not just watch like all the blockbusters that are very easy watching, but you might need to expand your palette. Like understand that the things that challenge you and even the things that you don't like are teaching you something. They're giving you a broader understanding of that thing. And so yeah, I think a part of it is just like getting used to the idea that being comfortable and having fun all the time is not good enough. Again, this is not aimed at you, Viri, but this is aimed at like, well, me and I think a lot of people when I was like 20, 22, 23.
I think another thing is thinking about what parts of life you really want to experience and
Mm-hmm.
then going and experiencing it, whether that is in a place or, creatively. Like creativity comes from doing. right? Like you can learn the theory of music, but until you're actually making music and playing music, like it's not the same sort of thing. The same thing with art, right? Like you can find artists that you like, but then like what art are you doing? I am not a competent artist, but I managed to end up creating like beautiful data visualizations in conjunction with other people, in collaboration with other people. And I found that collaboration with people was actually one of the things I love doing. There are so many different ways, but finding out which parts of life you want to experience will give you a directional guide to then finding more
Mm.
fulfillment in what you might want to do as part of your life and finding long-term meaning. Those things are crucial. Now, there's another part here that I think is super valuable for Patrick to comment on. But I before we close off this topic, like, do you have anything about that concept?
Look, I just think it's a lifetime's work, man. You know, uh, you it's going to take a while to figure out where meaning and fulfillment are going to come from. And I think you're right. Like you've got to, in the words of Grandmother Willow, you need to listen to your heart, and you will understand. Like you do need to spend some time with this. You need to try some different things and be willing to fall on your face. I don't
Do
really
not be
have better
afraid to
advice
fail.
than that.
Do
Yeah.
not be afraid to fail. And getting uncomfortable with something as part of your learning journey tells you that you are learning.
Hmm.
Like you're doing something hard and you are learning things. And being comfortable with being uncomfortable is one of the most crucial things for learning and becoming an expert in any particular thing that you might be interested in. Now, this
Yeah.
next part I think is the like if you're listening to us, then you probably are already attempting to make, better choices around your mental health and well-being. So, going back through this, another thing that myself and other young men don't know how to do is heal. We distract ourselves. We've got undealt with problems. I'm trying to go through therapy and be more healthy and face my emotions. So the fact that you're listening to us and commenting on this is like a good start because, there are only so many people that are doing that. And it means that you're interested in improving yourself. And that is the first step. Can I
Mm.
be interested enough to say that I do have some problems and I'd like to learn to be better? What I would like to ask is like, is there any sort of like set of, 2 to 5 on ramp crucial concepts or books or ideas that people should get started with on learning to get comfortable with yourself and well being and all the things you should know in order to build this framework to then sort of approach the material that we will cover or that you might want to cover in the future?
That's a really good question. I guess I don't know if I'm the right person to ask on that in some ways because I think that often the stuff that I consume in this area is like more
Pretentious.
textbooky.
What?
It's it's more textbooky, and I think you're kind of right that just starting to think about it, it doesn't necessarily matter whether you're reading a book or whether you're just journaling or whether you're just reflecting. Like it's a process of self-knowledge. I find Carl Rogers very interesting to read. Actually, this is an interesting thing. If you haven't ever had therapy before, you can go on YouTube and you can watch some of the parents of therapy in session. So there's a guy called Carl Rogers who's kind of the founding figure in person-centered therapy, which is broadly the type I practice. And it's, I suppose, one of the dominant types worldwide. This is therapy that's about looking at your emotions in the moment, that's about really accepting somebody and hearing what they're saying and trying to see the world through their eyes. You can go and watch videos of like Carl Rogers talking to clients on YouTube right now. And I find that a really interesting and really powerful experience. I think it's really powerful for people who haven't had therapy, especially because you see what it's like. You can see the effect it has on somebody to be really seen and understood and listened to.
Mm.
I will try and think of some stuff that some reading that I could recommend to people. Maybe we can put it in the show notes. But
I have some thoughts from my side of just
okay.
somebody who's approached it from a totally disorganized learning perspective.
Hmm.
It's like I'm interested in topics, and I went out with a woman in New York, and I ended up being her side piece for a while, which my friends adored. They loved the
Sure.
idea that like I kind of have main character energy, and the fact that I was somebody's side piece was like something they felt very very appreciative of. And she started to introduce me. She's a voracious reader. And she started to introduce me to, first of all, attachment theory and then love
Hmm.
languages. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then when you find these people that are crazy knowledgeable about stuff and then they give you references, like you're like, yes, give me more. One of the things Sam Hinkie talks about is sharing books with people. And he's like,
Hmm.
hey, I'll give you a reading recommendation. You give me one. And like a lot of times, like some of his best friends, like they build up these, shared knowledge of books, right? Founders podcast with David Senra is about these autobiographies that you learn so much from other people's lives. But I will say that in a much more modern context, which will make Patrick uncomfortable, if you start regularly looking things up on the algorithms, whether it's TikTok or Instagram, it will start to feed you more things that you might like. And what you have to be is
Hmm.
very consciously discerning about what fits with your things and what doesn't. So I found a woman named Sabrina Zohar that I thought was, it used to be Do the Work podcast. I thought her dating ideas were really interesting. And that, like, a lot of them are really early dating stuff that you get on Instagram. And then she has much more depth in her podcast. Recently, Jillian Turecki, It Begins With You. Like, she has some great stuff that causes me to think through ideas all the time on carousels there. I found a huge thing about shadow work and questions that you could ask yourself. And these are all just stuff that I ran across the internet. And I probably ran across a whole pile of dreck that I got rid of. And that's where I'm talking about being conscious about the things that you think have validity in your life or have ideas that you want to continue to pursue, or people that seem to say a lot of smart, thoughtful, wise things, and then getting rid of the bullshit. Like Patrick will also tell you there are some people that do pseudotherapy and it's really bad, and you should not pursue those people. So you got to be a little careful about it.
Hmm.
But there's so much stuff out there, and in many cases, it's taking the seeds of the ideas, finding the time to think deeply about them,
Yeah.
and then continuing to choose what you want to pursue as long as you want to go on with it. Sometimes the world will force you back to a set of ideas that you thought that you'd learned enough about. And then you're like, oh, no, I got big holes and big problems there. And I'm going to need to spend more time addressing this thing. But yeah, like be forgiving of yourself, but certainly do all these pursuits because it will teach you and make you a better partner and a better friend and a better son or parent
Mm.
in many different ways.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like follow your interests and then reflect on it. If you're interested in relationships, like you can watch Couples Therapy, the TV show, and with Orna Goranek, who's a New York therapist, or you can listen to Esther Perel, and you'll learn something there. You can, if you're interested in like desire, I've talked about Amir Srinivasan here, which is like a more philosophical perspective, but there's also something like Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski, which has the dual control model in it. The idea that when it comes to our sexual desire, we have brakes and an accelerator. And the accelerator might be working, but the brakes might also be, functioning super hard. Like this is often very, very helpful for people when it comes to understanding why their partner wants to have sex and they don't, or the other way around, this kind of stuff. There's a book called Please Find Detached, which is kind of like an intro to attachment theory. A lot of this popular stuff is written by therapists or psychologists. They know what they're talking about, and it gives you an idea of where to look next. So I think that honestly, that there's very little that I would just say I don't recommend this at all. I might not recommend it actively, I guess, but if it works for you and it doesn't hurt you and it doesn't hurt others and it teaches you lessons that you're then reflecting on, I find it hard to just say that's not good for anyone. It might not be good for me, but it might work for you.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that wraps us up for that little bit. So I did want to talk about the topic du jour, and it is
Oh,
this.
Jesus.
Come on,
I
what's
need
wrong
you
with
to,
you?
okay, no, but I need you to like walk me through the discourse on this because all I saw was a picture of Olly Murs and I was like, oh yeah, that guy. And
I was
and
going to
then I
start
was
with
just
who
like,
Olly Murs is
how do
first.
people have fucking opinions about this though? Like, okay, go on. I'm sure I'm gonna have opinions.
Do you think so? So
Oh.
Olly Murs is a former contestant on X Factor. He does sort of like fun poppy type music. I don't think he won necessarily, but I can't even remember. It doesn't matter who won X Factor. It matters who has a career later. X Factor, for those of you
Sure.
who know or don't know, is like American Idol, but for British people. So 20% of the talent.
Hmm.
And One Direction came out of there. Little Mix came out of there. There were some decent artists. Ella Henderson. He recently had a pair of photos, and there was this PR campaign because presumably he's got some tour coming up in the summertime. Like Katy Perry got noticeably very fit before her big tour that people have been parodying endlessly recently, and it's a thing that people who are musicians get in their best shape so they can go through these long shows and
Mhm.
look great and sell lots of tickets. So Olly Murs apparently underwent this fitness journey. And there's these two photos side by side, and we're going to show them to you on the screen for those of you who are on YouTube. So we'll make sure that you get the examples. And in fact, it became part of the discourse because one showed him kind of slightly pudgy, like, but muscular. Like you can see that he's fit. Like he's not fat. He's pretty fit, but he's not like cut or anything. And the other one is very cut, very lean. And some people then posted it saying, which one do you think is more attractive? And the men are like, clearly the one that is fit and cut. Like, look at all the work that he's done there in the gym. And then the women are like, no, I don't see that at all. Like I think the before example is considerably more attractive to me. And I'm not saying that this is a representative sample, but it became a big discussion point on the internet. And I think I brought it in here because I think the difference in opinion is actually incredibly crucial for people to understand in the dating space, which we talk about regularly,
Sure.
but also in self-image, we should talk about that too.
Okay. So yeah, I saw these images and I was like, so he presumably wanted to get in this shape, and then he got in this shape. like
Yeah.
that's enough for me. And so when people were kind of like, I don't know, talking as if their opinion of like what he'd done here was important, I just thought I don't really care. But I guess that people kind
It's
of want to
not
make
about him.
generalization. Yeah, but then I was like, everyone's making generalizations of like women generally like this and women generally like that, and I was like, I don't really give a fuck what women generally like. Like,
That's because you're
admittedly,
not
I'm
dating.
sure, but at the same time, like, I also, yes, you want to do things to make yourself more attractive on the apps, but at the same time, I'm not trying to be like attractive to like the general population. I'm trying to be attractive to the people who want someone like me, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. You're not helping me at all here with this is a podcast topic. This is useless, Patrick. Come on, step
No, I
forward with
think,
some useful opinion.
okay, look, I look at it, it's kind of interesting to me because I look at it and I think I'm looking at it through a lens of my own feelings about body image. So I
There you
look at
go.
him and I'm like, this guy's in good shape. He's actually in good shape before and after. What I don't know is all the other stuff. I don't know what his energy levels are like, for example. Because if you hear someone like Ryan Reynolds talk about the shape he was in for Blade Trinity, I remember he and Jessica Biel got in insane shape for Blade Trinity, and that was kind of one of Ryan Reynolds' like coming out parties, an event that we should all regret horribly. But he said, he was like, I was in incredible shape. My body fat percentage was insanely low. I've never been more miserable in my life. I was working out twice a day, eating food I hated. It fucking sucked.
Channing said the same thing. So Channing
Yeah.
Tatum, when he's been in amazing shape, he was on Kelly Clarkson. He's like, people do not understand how much it sucks. And
Yeah.
both these guys are, within 5 years of my age. In fact, like Ryan Reynolds is like 3 weeks different, I think, something like that. So I thought it was useful to highlight because I actually started to ask some women I know, I was like, what do you think about this? And they very much were of the opinion that the first one is the one that they're more likely to be attractive to as a portion, right? Like if they just had these two things. But I asked for reasons. And the
Mm.
reasons became quite interesting because
Yeah.
one of them is that, first of all, remember when I had my shirtless pic in the dating app and
Mhm.
Alina was like, fuck boy, right? That was a little bit of what this is. Like he has to spend so much time and energy on his image and his look there. Like, his priorities are all screwed up. And, maybe, he really cares about his self-image and like he has to spend a lot of time in the gym. And guys that are like that are usually going to be guys that have personalities that I don't want to hang out with. Or they're making such extreme concessions to being in that shape that you have to work with them a lot on like when you're going out with them. Like he can only eat these things at these times and he
Mhm.
doesn't have the space in his life to like go out for a burger or to share his chips with me or like any number of things, right? So they're
Sure.
having impressions about what he looks like and what he is like based off of his look. I thought that was really interesting. Guys have quite a different set of impressions. It's like, dude, look at that. That's fucking awesome. He's ripped. Like he's put in so much time and energy and discipline in order to get that. And you're like, respect, right? It's a mark of respect. Even if you don't respect his music, you respect what it took for him to get in that type of shape, especially since he doesn't look like he's all roided out. He looks like he's really quite lean and fit, and he's done it the hard way. So I think that those are two really interesting things, because the image of guys is like, what great fitness looks like is often like that bodybuilder fitness, super ripped fitness, like crazy lean, awesome gym body. And girls are like kind of muscular, like, shows maybe a little bit of dad bod, a little bit of body fat, like can
Mm.
get along easy to, but he's not got, nice big pecs and arms, as you've said before, were useful things that your girlfriend was like, yeah, I like that. I would like to, be able to put my head on that whenever I happen to be around you.
Well, and this is the thing. Like, that's why when I look at it, I'm kind of like, good for him. But from my point of view as well, I also think I don't really want this body.
No.
Like, because I'm, but not even like he's in much better shape than me, but also because I'm like, I have bigger muscles than this. I have a lot more body fat than this, but I have bigger muscles than this. And I have had to work over the years on being happy with a body where I'm like, well, I'm probably always going to carry a little bit more fat than this guy, even when I'm in really good shape. And I don't have, like the Arnie like armature where you're like 6'4" and like perfectly. But I know I can carry quite a lot of muscle for my size. And so I have learned to try and love that kind of body. And so as a result, when I look at a body like that, I'm kind of like, we are both men, but I don't really think, oh yeah, we could both have this body. I think we're like different species. And I do think that when you come to body image, you do sort of have to get into the mindset of there are people in your category and people not in your category. Don't try and be in a different category.
Right. Yeah. And these people have chefs and they have personal trainers,
Oh,
and
sure.
they
Yeah. Yeah.
like they're scienced to oblivion just to get this body in a natural way, or in other times an unnatural way. But I thought that the differences in opinions of the two genders, or the two genders we're talking about anyway,
Mm.
um, I find it quite interesting, because a lot of times we have this idea of what we think, and this happened in the dating apps thing as well, where like I was like, oh, this is what I think that I should project, but like women are actually telling you that I'm more attracted to this, and this is what you should be telling me so that I can opt in, because these traits about you don't change either way. Like
Mm.
you're attractive, you're smart, you're funny, you're educated, you like to travel, whatever. So I thought that was quite interesting, and it's just another point for men to realize that depending on what your goals are, it will change a little bit, like your approach to all these things. And fitness is another one where we've talked about fitness in the past. The other thing that I wanted to mention is twofold here. One, you have to do this for yourself. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter like what the fuck somebody else thinks about. Like, the only way to be fit and build a fitness regime that is maintainable and sustainable is to choose what you want to do, not like getting in shape for somebody else, because that is just a failure thing. We see footballers who are only in shape up to the end of their career, and then they balloon out into these
Mm.
these often sort of 5'8" men that love to drink beer, love to eat donuts, and like basically Homer Simpson, that used to be a Dutch midfielder. And so, like, what is sustainable for you is a big question. What are your goals on this is another big question. And a bit like in every single other instance we've talked about, like, you don't have to aim for perfection. Like, aim for
Mm.
being as good as you can be, and get comfortable with that, and then try to achieve it. Do the work that needs to achieve it. So yeah, I think that there's these two things that, like, what's most attractive, and then it comes back really to like, what do you want out of yourself? What are you comfortable with, and how much pain are you willing to undergo to get it? But don't do it because this is the most attractive thing to women, because you might even be wrong about that. So you might want to know that ahead of time.
Yeah, and there's so much bullshit baked into it.
Yeah.
I think especially if you're a person of color, for example, you grow up in a society where you're basically told like this is what you should look like. That is becoming less true, but it's still very true. And if you have fully internalized that and you haven't like worked through it, then it's going to make you feel inadequate forever. And whether that's your fault that that belief is in there or not, you're the only one who could try and get it out of there.
Mm.
So this and that kind of stuff as well is really corrosive. Like that's what leads to low self-esteem as well. Ultimately, you are going to have to, like, if you're short, if you're round, like if you got a lot of body hair, if you've got none, like you, whatever it is about you, like you're gonna have to just like wear it. Like it's the skin you're in. And overall, being having a chip on your shoulder about it, being really insecure about it, is what's going to be a problem. You're going to find yourself acting out in really strange ways. I think I
And
certainly
people
found
notice
myself
it.
acting out in my 20s, because
People
of
notice the insecurity. Like
sure.
women pick up on it immediately. They're looking for men who are comfortable and secure in themselves, partly because that means that they're not really going to turn that on you.
Mm.
And that's something they want as well. So another thing that came back in the feedback from the Olly Murs thing was like, what is he going to be like with me? Like, is he going to want me to be perfect? Is he going to want me to look like this? He's going to like, and you're reading the comments there, and it's clear that they've had boyfriends like this in the past that have sort of
Mm-hmm.
terrorized them a little bit because they were constantly commenting on their body image because they felt like they'd achieved something awesome. And like, that's not the way to go through life, and that's not the way to create a happy relationship with a.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting how much stuff kind of comes out of this stuff, but look, like fucking well done, Olly Murs. You got in shape. You had to work really hard for it. You looked fine before. You look fine now. Great.
It's gonna suck to stay that way though. So like like maybe you go through your phases and your ripples. Every time you get cast as Wolverine, you go back to being crazy ripped Hugh Jackman. But the rest of the time, you're like pleasantly very attractive man on stage Hugh Jackman, which is I think a little more pleasant lifestyle.
I definitely think so. And honestly, like a little bit more my speed.
You're a Music Man fan?
Not really, but I quite like Daddy Hugh Jackman. Or I did. I feel like Hugh Jackman's gone a bit fucking weird. Isn't he like a secret, like friends with the Kushners kind of weird fucking asshole?
I'm just gonna carefully step away from this and move on to our "Am I the Asshole?"
He's friends with Ryan Reynolds. So not a good sign.
Michael Bublé's friends with Ryan Reynolds too. Then I really like Bublé.
Okay.
Okay,
I
just
don't
because
have
somebody's friends.
I don't have a strong stance on Buble.
You have a strong stance on people being friends with Michael Reynolds, or sorry, Ryan
Yeah,
Reynolds.
but Ryan Reynolds is a very annoying bad actor who I also think is like an annoying self promoter. Like maybe he's a really nice guy, but I find him irritating.
I'm just going to open up the can here, everybody.
Oh
How do you
no, I
feel
can't
about
go to
James?
Wrexham anymore. Sorry,
No, how do you feel about James Corden?
cunt. The thing is about James Corden, he is talented. Like he was apparently incredible in One Man Two Governors when he was on stage. But he's in the History Boys. He's in like the original cast of the History Boys. I love the History Boys, and he can sing, even though he fucking insists on letting us know it constantly.
he
But I
wrote
do
he
find
wrote
him a
Gwen
very
and
annoying person.
Stacy as he's one of the two writers of Gwen. It's fun.
Yeah, look, if you like it, that's fine. It's not for me. Like, I don't think it's like shit and people who like it are bad, but
No.
like it's not a point in his favor for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, English people like invariably hate James Corden, and people who
Yeah,
are English adjacent. It's just a thing. And Americans like actually he's kind of talented and fun, and he's got the right accent, and he seems to enjoy life, and so it doesn't seem so bad.
knob.
I kind of like Ryan Reynolds as well. So there we are.
That's fine. But Ryan Reynolds is like, in your mind, you and Ryan Reynolds are like separated twins, whereas mine is like, I think like Daniel Radcliffe and I are like a couple of weeks apart.
I love Daniel Radcliffe.
Yeah,
He's
so
great.
Daniel Radcliffe is my version of this, where I'm kind of like, I won't hear a fucking word against Daniel Radcliffe, but I also think that Daniel Radcliffe seems independently like quite a cool person, and I think has done quite cool stuff with his weird fame. Like Robert Pattinson, who got super famous doing this weird thing, and then was like, "Oh, I'm going to use this clout to pursue my own strange interests."
I think
I admire
Kieran.
that.
I think Kieran Culkin is the most recent
Sure,
version of that. I
yeah.
I just enjoy everything about Kieran Culkin lately. It's so much fun.
And the thing I really like about Kieran Culkin is when he talked. Okay, so there was a thing that went round, where he and Coleman Domingo interviewed each other for the actors on actors thing,
Yes.
and he was talking about how he rolls out of bed like at the time he's meant to go, and Coleman Domingo was like, I get up, I do like 90 minutes of meditation, I really think about my day, and everyone was talking afterwards about, are you a Coleman or are you a Kieran? And I was like, that is not the distinction here. The distinction here is between someone who has kids and someone who doesn't. And Kieran Culkin, one of the things I admire the most is obviously grew up in a stage family, like his brother's like such a huge star. Like he is an actor, Rory's an actor. His aunt is fucking Bonnie Bedelia from Die Hard.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but you can, it's not surprising given that that it sounds like he's made a real effort to have an incredibly normal home life. And when
Mm.
he talks about, I remember seeing him talk about getting nominated for his first Emmy or something, and someone said, "Did it change how you felt about yourself?" And he said, "No, I still had to go and give my kids a bath." And I was like, that's a really nice place to be. And it just made me really admire him. And he's fantastic in A Royal Pain. He really is good. Not as good
Yeah.
as he is in Succession, in my opinion, but still.
Yeah, I like him a lot. I'm not sure. Thankfully, I'm not up for any Academy Awards or anything, so I don't have to worry about having a fourth child. But yeah, I'm not sure
Best
how.
podcast. When are we going to get that? Best short film for the stretch of Alina taking the piss out of your shirtless selfie.
Okay. You gave, see, there was a nice sojourn into things that you hate, and then we brought it back around to things that you like. So there we go.
Yeah.
You brought this one up, so I'm going to let you go ahead and take a big drink, and then lead off with
Mm.
reading the "Am I the asshole?" because I think you might have an opinion about this.
Okay. So yeah, quick. Am I the asshole this week? But it's am I the asshole for refusing to go to my grandmother's funeral and telling my dad it's hypocritical to pretend she was a good person? My grandma passed away 3 years ago. When it happened, my sibling and I refused to attend her funeral. She never treated us like her real grandchildren. She treated us with a lot of toxicity and hate mainly because she disliked our mum. We hated being around her. We eventually stopped visiting her altogether. But my dad always criticized us for how we felt about her. He was furious when we refused to attend her funeral. And then yesterday, so this is 3 years post funeral, my dad was talking about how good a person my grandma was. I hate Americans saying good of a person, but sorry. I interrupted him and told him that she wasn't a good person, at least not to us. Reminded him of the way she treated us. People shouldn't be hypocrites pretending someone was great just because they've died, when the reality was the opposite. And my dad is mad at me. He thinks I'm disrespectful, out of line. I think there's a lot of stuff going on here, a lot of moving parts. Do you have? Shall I lead off, or do you want to?
Oh, I think my judgment is very simple on this one, so you should probably lead off because otherwise I'll just kill the conversation.
Bro, 100%. I was like, you're not an arsehole. You're not an
No,
arsehole. You're
no.
allowed to have the opinion that you want. You're
Live
allowed to
your
have the opinion that you want.
live your fucking truth. And if you had people that were relatives that, you felt like they hated you and treated you terribly, like don't fucking pay respect to those people. No, absolutely not. Like these vibes are these vibes. Like I, I there are lots of different truths in life, but like this is pretty clear. And also I like the sibling solidarity on this one too.
Yeah, I agree. I think what's interesting here is yeah, there's something that I suppose that there's room for a little bit more grace with your dad here. Now, don't get me wrong, your dad's kind of been an asshole to you, but I think that your dad, there's some real built-in loyalty here. Dad
Yeah.
always criticized us for how we felt about her, and now he just wants to believe, remember, imagine his mother as a good person.
Yeah.
That is a completely intelligible impulse for him to have. I think it's fine for you to push back on it. And also I think it's fine for us to say when someone dies, they don't become a fucking saint. Unless, well, sometimes they do become a saint, but they don't become a
That's we
saint.
voted into that really.
Sure, but because they need to do a couple of miracles. But because they're dead, they aren't suddenly the best version of them. I agree with that. So this is a very small thing, I'd say, but it feels very pointed that your dad's saying this stuff, but in reality I think your dad's just trying to make sense of his complicated feelings around his mum, and
Exactly.
has apparently never come to terms with the idea that she was also a flawed, maybe vindictive, maybe unpleasant person, as well as presumably being a kind and loving mother to him.
Yeah.
That's a really hard thing for a lot of people to square.
It's really difficult to have those ideas in your head at the same time,
Mm.
especially over his own children, which I think is a little bit of why this is that way. Like, you should gently encourage your dad to go to therapy, to, talk about his mom so they can figure out like how he should feel, and make these very disparate type of feelings into a coherent whole. Your parents have needs around their parents and their
Yeah.
relationships around them, and you can't get past that. But also, you have a relationship or an experience, a set of experiences with this woman. You don't need to pretend that it was otherwise, and you don't need
Mm.
to be. You should be graceful towards your dad, but you don't need to like spend all this time and energy pretending things that weren't true. I think one of the things you said there is also interesting in that when people are gone, whether that is they're dead, or whether it's simply they're out of your life, there is, depending on how you feel about them, there is a habit that people have of going very one way or another about things. You either remember all the good things about somebody and you forget the reasons why things were hard and difficult, and or you remember all the bad things and you often get rid of the things that were incredible that led you to long relationships with person X, Y, and Z. I think it's very challenging for humans to hold like the whole of a set of experiences in their mind with someone
Mm,
that isn't there to give them those experiences
yeah.
anew. And I think that it's actually quite important to do this in the best way that you can and talk about it, when necessary. So this is kind of what's coming back here. Like you're pushing back, or this person is pushing back on their dad's idea of their mom, and the reality is they're complex, flawed individuals, and
Yeah.
everyone is. But the people that you used to go out with, if they were abusive and you only remember the good things, like that's terrible. Or if they're gone now, but and you remember the good things and like it's tearing you up. Some people flip over to the other side. You had great relationships many, many years where you produced wonderful things together, and they flip to the other side where the only way that they could get themselves to be in a spot where they're comfortable with their life and this relationship coming to an end is to turn it bad and negative. And that's also really
Mm-hmm.
unhealthy. And that comes back to bite you in a lot of ways. And sometimes it's a habit that you see recurring throughout someone's life, which I'm sure you've seen in therapy. Like if
Mm-hmm.
if all of your exes are assholes, you're the asshole. And if all of your exes were like, you have to ruin the image of the things that you built that you loved, you're actually harming yourself.
Mm-hmm. I think what you said before is so profound and is a really helpful thing to remember. If you try and only focus on the positive aspects of somebody who you've lost, there is something airless about that. There's something detached. You'll never really remember the complexity of them if you package the memories like that. And one of the hard things about grief, especially, is that over time, the memories often do replace the feeling, what it felt like to be with that person, what it felt like to be around them, to know that they were there. That's a really difficult transition. But trying to turn them into an icon, a religious icon, trying to turn them into like this perfect little model is, I think it fast forwards that process, and I think it's a bit of a disservice to somebody who's a real person. Like ultimately, if your dad died, like your dad wasn't a devil and he wasn't an angel, he was your dad. It's more complicated than that, and you're right. I think trying to turn somebody into something that they were not, trying to simplify somebody, is it's a self-protective act, as we talk about often, but it's also just a lie. Like it's just not the way that these things are. So if this person, if they wanted to talk to their dad about it in maybe a slightly more productive way, which I think is difficult because there's anger here,
Mhm.
but it would probably be to say, can you understand that while you remember her as a good person and a loving mother, she was really unpleasant to us. She was difficult, and our experience of her was this. And our loyalty ultimately is to our mother, who she mistreated. Can
Mhm.
you understand that? And does the memory of your mother and who you believe her to be supersede your desire to protect us, your desire to hear from us, like what our experience was with her? Because then trying to appeal to him as a father and trying to make him understand that you never see a whole person, you see one facet of a person at most. Usually that might be a way to have this conversation more productively. But fucking honestly as well, like if this were my client, I would say I really admire you
Yeah.
for pushing back on this. I really do. Like we are told, I think actually one of the most consistent lies we're told in society is like family, family, family above all. Blood is thicker than water, and family is important. But if you're not close to your family, that doesn't mean you're a bad person, and it doesn't mean that you fucked up necessarily. You know, you have the perfect right to cut people off if they cross boundaries that you're uncomfortable with. I'm not saying that you should do it just recklessly, but that is your right. And if you're doing it intentionally and you do it understanding why, then power to you. You know, I think that that kind of person deserves respect and support if they're willing to do that for on a principle or for a good reason.
I agree, and it's something that we talk about here, and we don't necessarily encourage you to just immediately go do stuff, but family is volatile and it's difficult and it's not something
Yeah.
that you chose. And that's the most crucial component. Like going forward, being intentional about the choices you make in your life and where you spend your energy and who you want to spend your time with. And sometimes your family causes you nothing but pain. And sometimes your family is too crazy to actually deal with, and it doesn't have to be your problem. We're told that it is, but it doesn't have to be. And the gap between those two realizations is pretty significant. So yeah, it's something to be aware of. I also, like, I feel very clean about this one. Like, well done to you. Good job having principles. But also, yeah, have some heartfelt conversations with your dad about your experience, and then also about grandma. So I think that wraps us for today. Thank you so much for listening to us. We love doing these kind of every other week, Ask Me Anything, and doing some internet therapy. If you have any questions that you would like to see us answer, any topics that you want to see us cover in the coming weeks, please put them in the comments. We love to hear from what you're enjoying. And we do get lots of positive comments, so we thank you for those as well. Like, subscribe, send this to your friends. It's been great to see some people that I have, hired, that I've worked with, send comments about, oh, wow, I didn't expect how much I was enjoying the podcast, but it's been really helpful to me. So yeah, it's good to hear that, because we'll keep these up. Otherwise, have a great week. Thank you so much for joining us once again. And Patrick, say goodbye to the nice people.
Goodbye, everybody. See you next time.
Patrick, a couple weeks ago, your wife said that she was fondling stationery. I wanted to ask you how that made you feel.
She didn't say that. She said she was fondling parchment. I'll have you know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I assumed that it was stationary. But
it is stationary, but it's not any old stationery. You know,
is it fancy?
Well, because my wife is writing her second novel at the moment, and like, spoiler alert, it's going to be set at least partially in the medieval period, and she'd been reading about parchmenters, and obviously at this point, like, you got different kinds of parchment made from goat skin, made from calf skin, you know, all this kind of stuff, and she was like, I have never held these. I don't know what they feel like. I don't know how they take ink. So she ordered some from someone who makes all these different kinds of parchment in a traditional way. And she was just sitting at her desk, just like fondling the goat skin paper. It's disgusting.
Did she let you fondle?
I think she would have if I asked, but I did not. I didn't want to get between her and her parchment.
Missed opportunity.
I don't think I can be in a polycule with like a dead goat.
I'm glad that you went there faster than I did. I was on my way. I was like, the only way you're going to get that type of experience is bestiality, and you live too much in London in order to get that properly.
I will say that that goat skin paper is quite veiny. You know,
is it goat foreskin paper?
It felt like that. You know, you could see the veins in it, which were
so grim,
inescapably testicular. Like, I did not enjoy it. And that's what they wrote the Bible on, Ted. You got all these monks there writing the Bible out on foreskin paper.
Well, when they misbehaved as monks, or when they were taken over, they just took the other monks and they turned them into new foreskin paper. So it's a virtuous cycle at the end of the day.
Oh God, what a horrible image.
Speaking of horrible images, how does it make you feel that, like, all of these commenters on YouTube, like, say, I want Pat to be my dad?
Did they say that?
Yeah, all the time. I got Rishi nodding up top too. Our producer's like, have you not watched the comments?
They should talk to my fucking kids. My kids will be like, no, you don't. Like, my daughter the other day, actually, like, I was dealing. I had both my kids because my wife had a book event, and I took my 3-year-old to go and pick the baby up from nursery. And when we got home, I realized that the baby needed to be changed. So I put her down on the mat, and it was just like a real mess. And I was like getting the wipes, getting the bag. And then I looked at her, and you have that moment where you think, where am I going to start here? And my 3-year-old came over, put her hands on her hips, looked over my shoulder, shook her head, and went, for Christ's sake. And I was like, I can't even blame my wife. I'm the only one who says this in my house.
Oh man, I got my in-laws. Whenever my children cursed and one of the children dropped the f bomb, like I was the one that got blamed for it, but I knew factually that the particular phraseology of this was not me. And yet I couldn't push back on it because I couldn't get my wife in trouble with her parents for saying the F bomb in front of our children. It's like, this feels really unfair. I mean, I'll just accept it because there are plenty of other instances where I've done this, but this in particular was not my fault.
I loved it when my daughter said "fuck" for the first time. Like my wife was just like, please stop laughing. Like, you're really going to go. She also has done that thing. You know how football fans went through that period where they would call Cristiano Ronaldo Penaldo, and then it kind of went to all players when you were trying to like say they were shit, so it'd be like Pessi or whatever, that kind of thing. My daughter does this just because she thinks it's funny, hence Poopopolis earlier. But she also said to me the other night, she was like, Papa, can you give me a puddle and a piss like before bed? She does it with the months of the year also. And when she gets to August, I couldn't explain to my wife why I was laughing. And I had to start with, I was just like, well, so do you know what a porg is? And she said, you know what? I don't need to know this.
Did you finish the explanation at a different time?
I think she got roughly the direction it was going in.
Was it simply implied?
It was kind of implied. My wife knows who she married. Like it is what it is. I'm so sorry about this, Despina. This has been like terrible, like kind of like boys' boarding school behavior.
Well, see, what happens is we go through these episodes that are very controlled, and we've got messages, and we're talking about parenting. We're keeping it on track, and then we get to release once every 2 weeks, where like we just get to cover all of the things that are there. And I enjoyed putting Patrick in slightly uncomfortable situations. But what we've realized from his stories is that he does it all the time. So